everybody, welcome to ARE Live. I'm Patrick Finnegan, producer of ARE Live here at Black Spectacles, and I'm joined with architect Chris Hopstock, who's going to review several project management mock exam questions. We're going to go through questions that cover PjM knowledge and skills related to tracking labor overages against work plan budget, calculating billable rates using net multiplier, selecting proper change documentation method, identifying required consultants for project type, and coordinating submittals for upcoming construction phase. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is the leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. We've built everything you need to pass the exams, including new video lectures with motion graphics and 3D animation, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, and unlike anyone else, with our Pass the ARE guarantee, in the unlikely event that you don't pass your exams, we'll pay for you to retake the exam. You'll also receive access to our deck of flashcards, which you can customize, quizzes after each video lecture section, and detailed content on the hardest parts of the exams. Lastly, our guided study process organizes all of your study materials into a daily study plan, showing you what to study each day that you can customize to align with your exam date. And this is all built upon a curriculum that ensures you're learning the right content, and they all work together with our custom-built platform to ensure that you retain the information so you remember it for the exams. With our ARE prep material, our pass rates are 40% higher than the national average, and our members report passing in half the time of the national average. And coming August 14th, we're launching a brand new CSE course designed to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE exam the first time, including expert-crafted California-specific study materials, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, and a structured study plan customized to your exam date. You can join the waitlist today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-exam-prep to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members that sign up. And if you're using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know so they can unlock access for your entire team when this goes live next month. Over on our Instagram, TikTok, and social channels, we post mock exam questions daily. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. Our next ARE Live will be on August 20th, where we'll be covering a PA mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And we offer two different referral programs. The first one is for firms and schools, where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a Refer a Friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership, and you'll receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And today we're going to be engaging exclusively on our online ARE community. So head over to community.blackspectacles.com, and right at the top, you'll see we've pinned a thread called ARE Live PjM Mock Exam July 2025. If you have any questions as we're going through ARE Live today, post your questions there, and we'll answer them live at the end of the session. And everybody who posts in that thread today will be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. Literally, all you have to do is go over to community.blackspectacles.com and say hi, and you're registered right there. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the episode to see if you won. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Chris Hopstock. In addition to working with us here at Black Spectacles, Chris is an architect based in New York. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for the intro, Patrick. I'm excited to go over these 5 questions today, but I think my favorite part of doing this is the Q&A and just answering any questions that you all might have as you listen to me go through these. So definitely looking forward to that portion as well. Before we get into the questions, I just want to talk about a common theme across some of the questions that we're going to go over today, and that is reading between the lines for questions that are ambiguous and just don't provide all the information that you wish that you had. For better or worse, the current version of the ARE has questions like this. We read about them all of the time in our community, so I've written some intentionally vague questions for today's episode that are loosely based on questions from NCARB's own demo exam, and I think it's important that we all look at questions like this. We really want to help you be able to answer these and be confident on exam day. So that's why that's my focus today. And that's also why we include these types of questions in our practice exam, section quizzes, and quiz breaks. So let's review these questions with the idea of making educated assumptions about the situation at hand so that we can answer the question. With that said, let's take a look at question 1. The work plan for a ground-up residential project includes 700 hours of time spent on the schematic design phase. The project team is composed of 4 employees with an average rate of $60 per hour, and the firm's net multiplier is 3.25. At the end of the SD phase, the project manager realizes that the project team spent 85 more hours on the project during the phase than was accounted for in the work plan. What is the total cost of these additional hours? A, $5,100, B, $39,250, C, $127,563, or D, $16,575. So this question is testing your understanding of some common financial terms that you need to understand for the ARE, as well as your understanding of how to determine a fixed fee for a certain portion of the work. Here we've got an amount of hours spent on a task, that's 85 hours, as well as the team's average rate and the firm's net multiplier. We also have the amount of time that was budgeted to this task, which is 700 hours. That piece of information is irrelevant to this question. This question is just asking how much the additional hours cost the firm. So a key missing piece of information here is whether this average rate that's talked about in the question is an hourly rate or a billable rate. Before we get into how we're going to decide which one it is, let's just discuss the difference really quickly. So hourly rates are simply the amount that an employee is paid in salary. Even if you make a yearly salary, you can compute your hourly rate by dividing that yearly salary by the number of hours worked in a year. We're going to talk about that in the next question. So just for right now, think about hourly rate as the amount of money that you're paid. Billable rate is what your firm charges their clients for your time. It's higher than the hourly rate because it includes additional funds to pay for really all types of expenses relating to running the office, like the office rent, software subscriptions, bills, salaries for administrative folks, and also, of course, profit for the firm. And to figure out your billable rate based on an hourly rate, you're going to multiply that hourly rate by the firm's net multiplier, which is usually a number around 3. I would say it's between 2.5 and 3.5 is pretty common. So this question just talks about the rate for these 4 employees on this project team, which is listed at $60 per hour. So how can we figure out if this is an hourly rate or a billable rate? We're going to have to make an educated guess based on the information we have. So if $60 was the team's average billable rate, we could divide that number by the firm's net multiplier to determine the team's average hourly rate. Remember, we can multiply the hourly rate by the net multiplier to figure out the billable rate. So if we want to do that in reverse, we just do some division. So if we were to do that, if we were to take the $60 per hour and divide by 3.25, that works out to about an $18.50 hourly rate for these employees. And remember, that's the average rate of a 4-person team. It would generally mean that some people make more than that and some people make less. I think it's pretty unlikely that the $60 is actually the billable rate, given what it would mean as the hourly rate. It's just really not a realistic figure in the year 2025. So more likely, this average rate that they're talking about in this question is the average hourly rate for these 4 employees. $60 an hour, if you were to turn that into a yearly salary, that would be an average salary of about $125,000 per employee. I think that's much more in line with industry standards, and it's just much more realistic. So if I was taking the exam today, of course, I wish they would have just specified what this rate means, but I'd have to assume this is an hourly rate, and then I'm going to multiply it by the firm's net multiplier to answer this question. So given that assumption, the math is pretty simple, and we can move on to the answer slide now. We're just going to multiply the hourly rate by the firm's net multiplier, and then finally by the number of hours spent on this task. So $60 an hour times 3.25 times $85 an hour, times 85 hours spent on this task is 16,575, which corresponds with choice D. If we've got no questions on that, we can move on to question number 2.
Look like no questions right now, but just as a reminder, if you have any questions and you want to bring them up to Chris, you can drop them in our community thread that we have called ARE Live PjM Mock Exam July 2025, and you can find that at community.blackspectacles.com. But with that, let's roll on to the next one.
All right, question 2. A project manager is meeting with the principal of their firm and is told that a new hire is going to be assigned to their project team. The project manager takes the following notes at the meeting. The new hire's salary is $110,000. They will be granted 3 weeks of paid time off or PTO. The firm's net multiplier is 3.5. What billable rate should be used for the new employee? Round to the nearest $5. A, $185 per hour. B, $195 per hour. C, $55 per hour. Or D, $110 per hour. So this question was inspired by a conversation actually in our ARE community last week, and it's a little similar to the last question in terms of what equation and financial terms you need to understand in order to answer it successfully. One piece of information that's missing is how many working hours are there in a year, which is really something that you should commit to memory before you take the PjM exam and also the PCM exam. I think you can run into a question that's going to require that number on both of those exams. Luckily, even if you don't remember the exact number, which is 2,080, you can just remember that it's simply the number of work hours in a week, which is 40, times the number of hours in a year, which is 52. You probably just have those numbers memorized. So that's a lot easier than 2,080. But the question here, what about PTO, paid time off? This question says the firm gives 3 weeks of PTO. Should we subtract that? The answer is no. Remember when we were talking about the last question, when we're determining billable rates, the whole point of a billable rate is to charge enough for the hours that an employee, charge enough on the hours that an employee works that it pays for all of the overhead associated with that employee, which includes their PTO time. Basically, the employee needs to earn enough during their billable hours to pay for all of their non-billable hours, whether those are PTO hours or time actually spent working, but that's not billable, like team meetings, working on RFPs, or working on the firm's website, for example. If you want to double check this, you can check out the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice, an official resource for the ARE. And if you search for the number 2080, that's the number that's used throughout the book in examples about determining hourly rates and billable rates and just generally doing this type of math. Okay, so with that piece of information, we have everything we need to answer this question. The math is a little bit different, and we can move on to the answer slide now. This time, we're going to divide the employee's yearly salary, which is $110,000, by the number we just talked about, 2,080 hours per year. That determines their hourly rate. Then we're going to multiply that by the firm's net multiplier to arrive at our answer, which is $185 per hour. If you're doing this on the ARE's calculator, which you will be when you're taking the actual exam, I would do the math just like we wrote it out here and just do the division and then immediately multiply, and you just kind of skip a step, and it's faster to use the saved memory in the calculator that way. I would say this is also a good question to talk about trying to understand what the question writer's testing you on as well. For this question, of course, you need to know the basic formula that we're talking about to determine a billable rate, and you need to know the 2,080 hours in a year. But I think the real piece of testable information here is whether you understand if PTO is included in the number of hours in a year or not. That's why the distractor about 3 years of PTO, 3 weeks of PTO is included in this question, just to see if that's going to throw you off or if you're confident that you know what number to use for this question. So I always advise people to think about what they're actually being tested on when they read a question. I think if you can figure that out, you feel like you have a leg up in the question itself, and you just feel a lot more confident in answering the question. All right, I think we can move on to question 3.
Yeah, let's roll back to question number 1, just kind of questions around specifics. So we have one that's essentially asking, why are we, well, I guess multiplying by the firm 3.25 and not the employees, like the 4 employees. So if you can answer that one. And then also people just have a little confusion around the $60 per hour. Some people were thinking that was $60 per employee. Could you do a little explanation on that?
Oh yeah, sure. So this question specifically says that the project team, meaning the project team as a whole, spent 85 more hours on the project during the phase than was accounted for. It doesn't say that each employee spent 85 hours individually. If it did, then I would totally multiply by the 4 employees. In reality, this question is a little simplified. Like if you were looking at a chart of this information when you were actually at work doing this, you would see that employee A spent 10 more hours, employee B spent 15 more hours, so on and so forth. You would use their individual rates to figure this out, but to not make the math so cumbersome in this question, it's just all averaged out. But that's a really good question. A really good point here to make is to be specific when you're reading the question and say, okay, the question says that the project team spent 85 more hours on the project during this phase. If you read it that way and read it slowly, you'll realize that we're just talking about 85 total hours here.
Sounds good, thanks. We can roll into number 3, but if you have any questions, you can go to community.blackspectacles.com and we'll bring you up to Chris. But with that, let's go to question number 3.
Yeah, that was a good one. I didn't even realize. Usually, I try to predict the questions we'll get when I write these, but I didn't think that was going to be a question. But it made a whole lot of sense once we talked about it.
For sure.
All right, question 3. An architect is performing contract administration for a project where the owner recently requested that the specified light fixtures in the library be changed to a different type of fixture. The architect and the design team have reviewed the change and approve of the new fixtures. At a recent OAC meeting where this was discussed, the contractor noted that the change will result in an additional charge of $150 per fixture. The owner reminded the contractor that this same change was implemented on a previous project that they worked on together, and the additional charge was only $100 per fixture. The contractor noted that they remember the past project vividly and that it was 3 years ago and prices have increased. They also noted that light fixtures are scheduled to be installed in the next 2 weeks. The owner noted that they wanted to ensure no delay to the project schedule due to this minor change. How should the architect document this change? A, change order, B, construction change directive, or C, minor change in the work. This question was kind of fun to write because I feel like I've listened to this exact conversation or plenty of conversations before like it in an OAC meeting, so that was fun. But regardless, it's a classic question that you can run into on several ARE divisions. I'd say that you can see this definitely for PjM, but also in the CE division and maybe even in PCM, maybe less likely, but it's kind of fair game in half of the exam, a question asking you how to document this change or a change. A quick primer on these 3 types of changes, which are all covered in AIA 8201 Article 7. A change order is going to be used when there's a change to either the cost or the schedule or both, and all parties agree to the extent of that change. So this type of thing comes up a lot when, let's say, there's an alternate in the contract documents. Let's say the design, the contract documents call for luxury vinyl tile flooring, but there was an alternate asked for hardwood flooring. The contractor provided a price. Now the owner wants to enact that change. Well, there should be no argument about the cost of that change. The contractor already gave a price when they bid the project. So it's all pretty straightforward. The parties are going to agree, and that can be documented as a change order. Everybody agrees. A construction change directive or a CCD is similar. Either the cost, schedule, or both are affected by the change, but you're going to use this one when there's not an agreement on how much of an effect the change has. Whether that's a time change or a dollar change, regardless, there's not an agreement on the extent of the change. You're going to use this because since the contractor needs to perform this work anyway to finish the project, the CCD documents it, and they're going to figure out the extent of the change later, maybe going through dispute resolution processes if they can't come to a mutually agreeable decision. But regardless, they're going to figure it out at some later date, and the contractor is going to get started. Finally, you've got a minor change in the work. This one's different from the previous 2 in that it does not affect the cost of the project or the schedule. So maybe you think you're changing like a paint color before painting has begun, obviously, but maybe you're changing a paint color during the foundations phase of a project. There's really no argument that a paint color, one is going to be more costly than the other and really should not be affecting the contractor's schedule. So minor change in the work is what it sounds like. It's minor and it doesn't affect schedule or cost. So here you've got a really long back and forth to read between the owner and the contractor, but I think after reading it, you probably should come to the conclusion that there's not an agreement on the extent of this change. It's definitely going to cost more. They don't agree how much. The contractor thinks it's $150 per fixture. The owner thinks it's $100 per fixture. There's a bit of a trick in this question here because the owner refers to the change as minor in the last sentence of this question, but that's just a trick. The owner doesn't determine how to document a change. They're just kind of talking colloquially, and the architect is going to determine how to document this, any type of change, and definitely this one. Just kind of an example of the trickery that you might see on the ARE. It's also kind of interesting that it's included in the last sentence before the question itself, so it might weigh on your mind. You see the word minor, you see minor in choice C, you might choose it. Don't do that. So just to recap here, given that this change does affect the cost of the project, there's no disagreement on that. It's going to affect the cost. We just don't know how much. There's not an agreement on what that additional cost is. We can confidently choose choice B, construction change directive, or CCD to document this change. Okay, question 4. An architect and engineering firm recently agreed to design a new restaurant. The firm has 2 principals, 1 architect and 1 structural engineer, as well as 1 project team consisting of a project manager, project architect, and engineer in training. The project will be delivered using the design, negotiate, build project delivery method. Which of the following consultants should the architect hire? Check the 3 that apply. A, structural engineer, B, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing or MEP engineer, C, civil engineer, D, commercial kitchen consultant, E, cost estimator, or F, geotechnical engineer. So at first glance, it looks like it's possible that all of these consultants would be helpful on a project, and that's pretty common. I mean, why wouldn't you want as much help as you can get? But the question's asking us to choose the best 3 here, and that's what we're going to need to do. It's also a realistic situation in real life. You know, there's going to be budgetary constraints. You can't have every single consultant on a project. So it's a pretty realistic question. Also note in the question itself, it's asking which of the following consultants should the architect hire? That's a really specific point that we're going to get into as we go through each answer choice. So choice A, structural engineer. On the ARE, just about every project is going to require a structural engineer. I would say unless it's maybe an interior renovation and the question's really clear about a limited scope of work, maybe just talking about millwork and like interior finishes, then you can say there's not going to be a structural engineer. But in ARE world, a structural engineer is like critical to the project team, and without specific information to the contrary, I would want them on the project team. Here, though, we're working at an AE firm, an architecture and engineering firm. We've got 1 principal, the other principal that's not an architect is a structural engineer, and we have an engineer in training on the project team. So you've got to think, why were all those clues included in this question? I think it's because the question writer, in this case me, wants you to not choose structural engineer for this question because it seems like you have the in-house capability to do structural engineering. So I would probably not choose it for this question because there's some really specific information in this question that the writer included to make you not pick that, and so that they can defend why structural engineer is incorrect for this question. So I would not choose that here. Looking at choice B, MEP engineer, again, just like structural engineer, just about every question, every project that we're talking about on the ARE is going to require an MEP engineer. I know that in real life that may not be the case, but for the ARE, every project pretty much is going to have an MEP engineer. So it's part of the architect's basic services to provide this when you read the B101. And reading through the question again, it doesn't seem like we have that capability in-house. Our partner here is a structural engineer. We don't know what kind of engineer the engineer in training is, but still they're not licensed. So we're probably not providing in-house MEP services. I think that that's a really good choice as a correct answer here, that we should hire an MEP engineer so that we can provide that part of our basic services. It's also very important for a restaurant design that the interior of the restaurant be comfortable. We're going to want an MEP engineer to help us do that. Okay, so we've got 1 correct, 1 incorrect. Choice C is civil engineer. So a civil engineer is likely required for the project, but according to the B101, they should be hired by the owner, not the architect. And remember, this question is asking who should the architect hire? It's a really important distinction to make. And again, on the ARE, the architect is pretty much never going to be hiring the civil engineer unless there's some really specific information in the question about why that needs to be the working relationship. Without that, it's never going to be correct that the architect should hire a civil engineer. Choice D, commercial kitchen consultant. So we're designing a restaurant. This is a really natural choice for us to hire. We seem to have a very small firm here. Nothing indicates that we have the expertise to specify commercial kitchen equipment. I know it's not part of our basic services to provide this type of a consultant, but the question's not asking you about basic versus additional services, and it would be totally reasonable to assume that when you're designing a restaurant, you're going to be providing that additional service to design the commercial kitchen. It's a very big part of a restaurant project. So I think unless we find two way better answer choices, I would be choosing commercial kitchen consultant when I see a restaurant project as a consultant that the architect's going to hire. All right, so we've got two correct, or we think correct answers, and we're going to look at choice E, the cost estimator. So architects need to provide estimates of the cost of the work at the end of each design phase. Large firms might have this capability in-house. This is, again, a small firm. I think it's 5 people if I counted correctly, so probably don't have that experience in-house, that capability in-house. It could be a good choice to add to the team. We know we need to provide this service where we're delivering a project using the design, negotiate, build delivery method. That's an indicator that the question writer wants us to think about the B101. So I think that's probably a good choice. We're going to look at choice F and see if it's better, but I think E is looking pretty good right now. And choice F, geotechnical engineer. Just like the civil engineer, this consultant is generally hired by the owner directly. If you look at the B101, it's going to say that the owner hires the geotechnical engineer. Again, unless there's a really specific reason to think otherwise, the architect hiring the geotechnical engineer is going to be incorrect. They're a critical part of the project team, but hired by the owner for the most part. So with that, we've got what we think are the correct answers here: B, MEP engineer, D, kitchen consultant, and E, cost estimator. You can also kind of do this question in reverse and think about the incorrect engineers, the structural engineer incorrect because we have that expertise in-house, and then the other two choices incorrect because the owner generally hires these consultants. So even if you're kind of on the fence about cost estimator or kitchen consultant, if you look at the wrong answers here, the other choices, and remembering that you have to pick 3, I think you can get behind B, D, and E being the correct answers here.
Sweet, thanks, Chris. Looks like we've got a couple questions and then also some for question number 3, and then we'll roll back to question number 1 too. But
sure.
Starting out on this first one is, why would the architect not contact or contract the civil engineer? And then I'll also do another one too of someone was asking why the cost estimator.
Yeah, so why the architect wouldn't contract with the civil engineer? It's a good way to think about the consultants that the architect hires versus the owner is the architect hires the consultants that design generally the building itself and the things inside of the building, and the owner hires the consultants that have to deal with the land that the building sits on. So civil engineer, they're designing stormwater management, maybe a septic system if that's needed, driveways, parking lots, things like that. It's just not common, and it's not according to the B101 that the architect would hire this consultant. So I know in real life, I know of several architecture firms that have their own in-house civil engineering. It's pretty common in rural areas so that you can provide full service design services to your clients. But for the ARE, we're talking about big commercial projects, and it's not common for the architect to hire that consultant. And not only not common, it's going to be incorrect on the ARE for the architect to hire that consultant. Cost estimator here is, I would say, like, it's the third best answer here, and we have to choose 3. So basically, you're being tested on, do you understand that the architect has to provide some cost estimates during the design process? The answer is yes. And does it look like this firm has the capability of doing that? I would say no. It's a very small firm. They probably can't do that. So it's a good thing to farm out to an expert in that field.
Gotcha, cool. And then we also have someone, I think this is for the same question, but they're asking about a landscape architect in this one too. Is that just simply just because that's just like not one of the answers that's available in this one?
Exactly, yeah. I think if landscape architect was a choice, I still think the correct choices here are better than landscape architect, because there's nothing in the question that says that we're doing any landscaping at all. You know, the owner could be hiring a landscape design build company that's going to handle the landscaping. This would be not a great restaurant, but there could potentially be no landscape. I mean, maybe it's in an urban environment and there's just nowhere to put any landscaping, so it's not necessary. There's really nothing in the question that says that a landscape architect would be needed. It's also not part of the architect's basic services to design.
Gotcha, cool. And then let's hop over to question number 3 too, and then we have one for question number 1 also. But first one is architects can't issue change orders, right?
So according to the AIA suite of documents that you'll study for these exams, the architect does process all of these change documents. I know that that is not the way most projects work. I never processed a change order in my life as an architect on any projects because I don't have all of the information that is needed. I mean, the contractor has all of the information and they can provide it to me, but then I'm just doing paperwork really. Like the contractor could fill out the change order. But according to B101, A201, the architect is the person that processes these documents. So when you're taking the ARE, that is the answer. You do need, the whole idea of a change order is that you have consensus amongst the owner and the contractor and yourself as to the extent of the change. So you're not kind of unilaterally issuing this change order. It needs to be agreed upon by those other two parties. But you're in NCARB world, you're the person that's or the party that's processing that document.
2 questions off of that. So for the first one, could you just do a quick explanation again on why you choose CCD rather than change order again? And then kind of stemming off of that, this is kind of like if we were to change the situation, but if the contractor and the owner were to agree on the cost of that $125 per fixture, would that then change the answer to A? Or change order?
Yes, if they were to split the difference and agree at 125 in the meeting, and it said that in the question, I would choose change order because now there's consensus and that's what a change order is used for. Cool. The reason we're choosing B, construction change directive, is just this whole back and forth that one of them is at 150, the other is at 100, and they haven't agreed in this question. So what happens is you issue a construction change directive. If they come to an agreement after that's issued, both parties sign it, that document, that same document, becomes a change order because both parties have signed it. You now have agreement on the extent of the change, and it's become sort of morphs into a change order.
Perfect, thanks. And then just one question on question number 1 that we have too. So this is from Matthew, and he's asking, can you clarify why the cost incorporates that net multiplier? He understands that total represents the lost income, but isn't that different from the cost to the firm? Wouldn't a break-even rate be closer to the cost, or simply 85 times $60?
Yeah, I think I understand. I think if there was information in this question that would help you understand what the firm's break-even multiplier is, then maybe. But you're never going to get a question like this and have to assume, okay, the break-even multiplier is whatever it is. So I think it's taking it a little bit too far. Also, I don't think any of these choices would align with that math. I'm sure that they don't. So it kind of comes down to you have to choose the best answer of the ones that are provided. And a lot of these math questions too, they have to be a little bit simplified so that you don't need to use a spreadsheet to answer them, which is kind of unrealistic. So that's just something to keep in mind also. Math is usually not going to be this like crazy multi-step math that you need to do to answer the question.
Cool, awesome. And then one more, just kind of on a clarification on just kind of like the concept of a change order. So Mark is asking, a change order is requested by the contractor, issued by the architect. So would that mean that the contractor can fill it out, but then needs to get that approved by the architect? Would, quote, issued be a proof of the change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in reality, the contractor could be the one that puts pen to paper and fills it out, but ultimately the architect is the one responsible for it according to the AA documents. The architect, the owner also is a key party in agreeing to the amount of the change order or the whether it's a monetary amount or a number of days delay or something. So it's not something that just the architect and contractor can do without the owner's involvement. A really key part of a change order is that there's agreement amongst the three main players in the project: architect, owner, contractor.
Perfect, thanks. And with that, let's roll into question number 5, last one we got. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. All right, a project manager is delegating submittal review to their project team for a new construction cast-in-place concrete high-rise project that just completed the foundation phase of the project. At a recent owner architect contractor or OAC meeting, the contractor noted that the project will proceed immediately into the superstructure phase. Which of the following submittals should the project manager ensure is reviewed this week? Check the 3 that apply. A, rebar accessories product data. B, concrete formwork layout. C, temporary shoring shop drawings. D, elevator hoistway layout. E, tower crane concrete embedment shop drawing. Or F, curtain wall concrete embedment shop drawing. So this is a pretty common project manager activity. You're going to be determining what work needs to be done and prioritizing that work to help keep the project on track. Let's take a look at each choice and do a little process of elimination and determine the 3 correct answers here. So A, rebar accessories product data. This is a pretty common submittal for a cast-in-place concrete project. You might be reviewing things like those little chairs that hold the rebar above the bottom of the form, for example, maybe some bentonite clay, stuff like that. All the accessories that are going to be used throughout the concrete pour. We're about to enter the superstructure phase of the project. We definitely want to prioritize this type of a submittal, and it's a very common submittal for this project type, so I would say that that is a correct answer. B, concrete formwork layout. So you might think the same about this one, but notice the word formwork in the question. So formwork is temporary, and a good rule of thumb is you should never review anything on a project that's temporary in nature. If you go back to what the AIA documents say about the architect's role in contract administration, it's to analyze that the work, when complete, is going to be in accordance with the design intent. So that whole when complete phrase is really important to remember. You shouldn't be reviewing anything that's temporary in nature or just part of the contractor's means and methods. Formwork is definitely a means and methods item, and I would say it should not be reviewed. There's maybe like a special case if you're specifying a specific finish on the concrete, that you want a specific type of formwork to be used to apply that finish. Maybe you can review the product data for that formwork, but I wouldn't review a form work layout drawing as for any reason on a project. Okay, the same thought process can be applied to temporary shoring shop drawings. I've been asked, along with the structural engineer on a project, to review one of these submittals and had to tell the contractor that we can't do it. I would say this is a time when the ARE and real life are the same. You really should not be getting involved in any of these types of submittals that are temporary in nature. There's a couple of reasons why you don't want to do that, but you could be construed as getting involved in the contractor's means and methods, which is never a good place to be. It could, if something goes wrong with that temporary shoring now, shoring holds up earth from caving into a hole. You don't want to be involved in reviewing that. That's really on the contractor and an engineer that they hire to design that sort of a thing. So with that, B and C are incorrect, and we're going to look at D, the elevator hoistway layout. This shop drawing typically comes from the elevator subcontractor. It's important to have it reviewed before concrete starts to get poured. You want to make sure your shaft dimensions are correct. Sometimes the shaft dimensions might be a little different than what's in your design drawing, just based on the latest and greatest elevator products from that manufacturer, or maybe a different manufacturer was chosen. So that's a really key thing to make sure is aligned before concrete gets poured. Really, it should have been reviewed before the foundation was poured in this question, but here we are. I would say it's definitely a correct answer to this question. If it hadn't been reviewed already, you definitely want to review it before superstructure. So D is correct. So we've got 2 correct, 2 incorrect, and we're moving into embedments. So what's different about these 2 embedment answers in choice E and F? So the tower crane embedment definitely sounds like a temporary situation here, maybe a safety issue. You're attaching the tower crane to the structure of the project, not something you want to be involved with. These types of submittals I would say should be returned as not reviewed. You should explain to the contractor why. You can always fall back on that they're not required as per your specs, and you only review submittals that are required in your specifications, just if you kind of want to explain why you can't be helpful in the situation. So that leaves curtain wall concrete embedment. Seems very similar to the previous answer, but this one is correct because these embedments are permanent and they're part of your project. These are how the curtain wall gets attached to the superstructure. You should have designed them during the design phases, and you'll want to review that they are in accordance with your design intent for the project. So, and also you definitely want to get these reviewed before the superstructure starts to get poured, because anything that's an embedment in the concrete gets set into the concrete when it's wet and the concrete cures around it. So if something like that gets missed, it's just a lot more work to get it in place in the future. And that means probably more money for the contractor and owner. So to wrap up this question, we want to review A, the rebar accessories, D, the elevator hoistway shop drawing, and F, the curtain wall concrete embedments. These are critical items when you're pouring a superstructure. And really, if you look at all of the incorrect answers, they're not things that you should review ever. So the whole information in this question about where we are in the project is somewhat irrelevant to this question, just by luck. So sometimes you can get lucky and just, the incorrect answers will be obvious without really thinking about the situation that the question's posing. And that's all I've got. Any other questions?
Yeah, love to see it, Chris. We got two questions. One, let's just go with from Christopher, that's asking, what's the best way to approach a question like this to determine what is temporary and what is not? And then another one after this one too. Can you explain more about the tower crane concrete embedment?
That's a great question that kind of gets to the interrelationship of all of these exam divisions. You're not going to study these things when you're studying for project management specifically. But you have to think about it. If you're managing an architectural project, you're going to need to bring some knowledge to the table about architecture, about how buildings come together in order to answer some questions. They're not just all going to be about what type of a schedule should I use in this situation, or how much should I charge for this. There some questions. The same is true on the CE exam. The CE exam is about evaluating construction, so you're going to study all of the you're going to study the contracts and all of the things that the architect does to document things during the CA phase, but you also need to know about construction in order to answer questions like this about what you're seeing in the field. So I think it's one of the reasons we don't recommend taking PjM first. So that maybe you can get some more experience in the real world and maybe review some of these things at your job when you're working. This is the type of question where I think some experience or having taken some of the other more technical exams first would be helpful in answering a question like this. And then the other question was, what is a tower crane embedment shop drawing? So a tower crane is something that's used on high-rise projects to hoist materials up to the very top of the building. So it's, as you can imagine, a very tall metal structure, and it attaches to the superstructure as it's getting built. They raise the crane higher and higher, and it attaches to the superstructure of the building for lateral support. So it's not just a freestanding metal crane that would easily tip over. So as you can imagine, you didn't design this when you were designing the project, and really you should only be reviewing submittals for things that you designed. So that's how I would rationalize, even if I didn't really know what this was, that's how I would rationalize. Just seeing the word crane, I know I didn't design anything having to do with a crane, so that's probably incorrect.
Sweet. Looks like I have three more questions. And this first one's kind of almost like an assumption one. So in the ARE, will elevator hoistways always be assumed to happen in the architect's design shafts? Their original thought was that they were temporary hoists that are not in the building.
I see. Yeah, I think it would be like unfair and tricky if this was a temporary. I see the word hoistway could be a little confusing. I think unless the word temporary is used for something that could be temporary or permanent, I would assume it's permanent. That's the way I would go about that.
Gotcha. And I really like this next one because it's more about real life experience versus NCARB expectations. But how would one better distinguish between the way tasks are typically handled in architectural practice versus how NCARB expects them to be approached in the ARE? Are there strategies for recognizing when real world experience might conflict with the test objectives?
Yeah, this is a great question, and actually is one of the things that I struggled with when I was taking the ARE. Whenever I teach one of our virtual workshops on Sundays, we talk about how did we struggle with the ARE, and I always bring this topic up because I worked at a firm in New York City. I was working for real estate developers, and my challenge was we didn't use any of the AAA contracts. We had our own standard contract that we were using with all of these clients, and these were relatively sophisticated owner clients that we didn't need to do certain things for. They had in-house capability to do it. So my real world experience was very different than what I was learning about and expected to know about on the ARE. So I think how I got around it at the time was I read the contracts. I happened to like contracts and was going to be a lawyer if I didn't become an architect. So I happened to like that. So that worked for me. I would say if you're not that type of person, which is probably not common, I think our materials do a fantastic job of explaining to you what you need to know for the exam. And when you're watching or consuming our content in whatever way you're consuming it, videos or exam explanations, think about how things are different from what you do in your real world life, and realize that what we're teaching you is what the ARE wants you to answer, and we back it up with what the contracts say. And that just might be different from how your firm does it. There's also tons of regional differences in how firms operate and just business practices that are different. It's a national exam that covers a variety of topics, so it's got to be standardized in some way. So that's, I think, the best advice I could give about a topic that I personally struggled with as well.
Perfect, thanks. And then last question we have is, can you explain what the superstructure phase is? Is that just a CA phase, or can you just further explain what that is?
Yeah, so it's a construction phase, so also a CA phase, but usually the beginning of a project is going to start with your excavation and foundation phase. So think about they're going to dig a hole and then they're going to pour whatever foundation you designed in that hole. That's the beginning phase of a project. The next phase is going to be the superstructure phase, which is where you build the structure of the project above grade, any type of whatever it is, concrete, steel, wood, that's generally called the superstructure. So superstructure is everything above grade and foundation is everything below grade. Those tend to be different subcontractors that do each of those things. That's why the phases are broken up that way on a construction project.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. That's all for today. Chris, it's been such a pleasure to have you, and thanks for helping to support the architecture community. I'm already seeing in our community right now, people are already saying how informative and helpful this was, but appreciate all your help with this.
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm looking forward to doing it again next month.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is a leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. And coming August 14th, we're launching a brand new CSE course designed to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE the first time, including expert crafted California specific study materials, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, and a structured study plan customized to your exam date. You can join the waitlist today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-exam-prep to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members. And if you're using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know so they can unlock access for your entire team next month when this course goes live. Our next ARE Live will be on August 20th, where we'll be covering a PA mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, we post mock exam questions daily. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. And we offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. But we also offer a refer a friend program too. You can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership and receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they sign up. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And congratulations to Matthew Lewis. You posted in our ARE community today and you just won a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. I'll reach out to you via email to get your size and shipping information, and we'll be in touch soon. And just a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible to win a free t-shirt, post a question you have about our featured topic in our community during our next ARE Live. And our community is always active, not just during ARE Live, so poke around and see what your peers are up to and asking about. Finally, be sure to take our survey, which you'll find in your email after this episode, and share any suggestions you may have. I promise we read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. Thanks for tuning in.